preliminary master plan for Bowie, Mitchellville, and vicinity. Turn it over to Mr. Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stand here. It's a little easier to get through this document. I'll try to do it as quickly as I can. This is the updated Bowie and vicinity master plan from 2006. Park and Planning has been working on it for the past year or so. There was a lot of public engagement, workshops and things that they've held in the community, so there is a lot of community input represented by this plan. This plan is posted on the city's website, the link to the plan on the Project Park and Planning website. What we've also done on the city website is that we've created a couple of reference documents. One is called the City Staff Review, which captures the 340 strategy recommendations that are in the plan and puts them all into one table for ease of reference. The other thing we did was we produced a document that's called the City Development Policies Comparison Table, which goes through the City Council's development review policies and does a side-by-side comparison as to whether the master plan strategies respond to the city's policies. And we addressed that in our memo. The memo was dated September 7th, and this was intended to be the staff recommendation regarding the preliminary master plan. And like I said, we could get through this probably in about 10 or 15 minutes of me describing what's in there, and then I can handle any questions before we go to the public hearing. I wanted to state that the County Planning Board and County Council are going to have the joint public hearing on October 4th at 5 p.m. So the result of the City Council's review will be sent to the county as part of this record, or their record. Their record will close for written comments on October 19th, close of business October 19th. I mentioned there are 340 strategy recommendations contained in the plan. Our memo goes through a number of those items. We also specifically call out a lot of the positive aspects of the plan, things that the City Council can support on the pages 4 and 5 of the memo. And then moving on to the analysis section, which starts at the bottom of page 5, I just wanted to touch on a few of the recommendations that we have. The first category there is zoning for multifamily and higher density residential. And the plan, as you may know, the county council changed the county zoning ordinance through the rewrite process, and it will allow multifamily units in the shopping center zone. So that's going to be a permitted by right use. And so this master plan that we're going through revision now really can't change that. That's something that's a countywide decision that's already been made. But there are some locations in this plan where additional zoning is going to be recommended that will create more residential. One of those areas is in the Zug Road area of Old Town Bowie, where there's currently industrial property, and the plan is recommending changing all of that property over from industrial to the CGO zone, which will then allow the multifamily units and as part of some type of revitalization of the industrial area. Our recommendation in this case is to support partial rezoning of that Zug Road area, and we list certain parcels that are closer to the Old Town Bowie area versus some of the existing businesses that are out there on Zug Road, contractors, businesses, and so forth, that we feel are necessary and essential to the community, providing a service to the community, so that we think some of that industrial zoning should remain. So that's item A. Item B relates to the Bowie Center and what you call the center of the city, or the Bowie Town Center area. And in our review of this item B, we felt that there is really a need or a desire to plan on a broader scale for this central portion of the city. And staff has conducted a study of the particular area, and we've attached some maps to the back of the packet that show sort of the middle third of the city, extending from just north of US 50 down to Mount Oak Road and going across Route 301. We believe that should be designated as the center for future planning purposes. And we discussed that in the memo. at great length, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the maps reflect the boundary area that we're recommending. We also think that the county should conduct a general plan centers assessment of the center to really provide recommendations for improving the completeness score for the center. And that's a methodology that was devised by the county when the general plan was approved in 2014 as a way of rating the conditions of the center and recommending how those centers could be improved. And so we'd like to see that assessment take place as part of this plan update. Our further recommendation about the Bowie Center is affecting the core area, and that's discussed in item C. The core area has been identified in the plan as the Bowie Town Center retail area, as well as some of the property across the road on the north side of Maryland Route 197. We believe, as we do with the recommendation for a larger center overall, we believe the core area should be expanded to include a lot more property on all 4 quadrants of Northview Drive and Route 197, extending down Route 197 to the Gateway Center, including the whole Gateway Center, as well as the front portion of Melford, where you have the hotel, the office buildings, and the retail section of Melford. So in a sense, those are all joined together, and we believe that that should be the core for planning purposes, sort of the more urban portion of the Bowie Center. That's recommendation C. Recommendation E is, D is related to the Superior Lane Boulevard concept, and this is something that comes up in the Land Use Strategy 17.3, where the recommendation, and there's a rendering in the plan that shows what it could hypothetically look like, to create an active and tree-lined boulevard with infill restaurants, shops, and things like that. But the issue with that we have is that the right-of-way does not really exist along Superior Lane. That it's a fairly narrow right-of-way, and to create a boulevard, you really need a tree-lined median, and there really just doesn't seem to be, this doesn't seem to be a concept that can be implemented. We also felt that by extending that boulevard into the Free State Shopping Center property and then beyond, even including a pedestrian connection into the Meadowbrook section, that this may justify future residential development on that commercial property, which we know that council is opposed to. So we recommend opposing this particular recommendation in the plan. Moving on to item E, a similar idea of working with the existing uses in Bowie Gateway Center. The idea is to create more of a recreational focus, creating an active linear park from the Bowie Gateway Center using the stormwater management parcels that exist there adjacent to Coles and near the intersection, and using that open space to create a recreational feature. And the city really hasn't been involved in any or consulted in any of this idea, and we believe that this concept is really something that's premature and not something that the city should support at this stage. Our recommendation for item F relates to a proposed piece of property or proposed development on a piece of property at Mitchellville Road and Peach Walker Drive. And there is a development or a developer that's expressed an interest in constructing a small townhouse community at this location. But the land in the plan actually identifies only one of the parcels that the developer owns, and we believe that really this location is probably appropriate for townhouse development, as the Lake Village Manor property exists just to the north of that, and that this would help to round out that community. So staff supports this recommendation of the plan. Item G relates to the council's policy about constructing an arterial road north of Bowie State University. This has been a long-standing council policy to try to get the state to build a road linkage between Maryland 197 and Maryland 424 and Route 3 in Anne Arundel County. And we believe that this has merit. It shows up in the county master plan of transportation, as well as the Bowie State Mark Station sector plan already. And we think that the ongoing efforts to develop transit-oriented development at the university and the adjacent properties would benefit from this recommendation. Item H has to do with reclassifying Maryland 214 between Jennings Mill Drive and US 301 from an expressway to an urban arterial. And the reasoning for that comes from our study that we recently completed for an overpass, pedestrian overpass of Maryland 214. The road is currently classified as an expressway, which means at some point in the future it could be divided or developed as a limited access road or access control road and with high speeds. And we feel that with the development of South Lake to the south, and we're trying to connect South Lake, which is part of the city, into the rest of the city, that by downgrading the classification and making it more of an urban arterial, you'll have more of an opportunity for complete streets, techniques to be used, pedestrian-friendly, multimodal approach. And so we think that this is something that the plan really kind of overlooked. It didn't have a recommendation about it, so we're recommending that now. Item I has to do with a few of the development review guidelines. As I mentioned, we did a side-by-side comparison. There are a few of the items that did not show up in the plan, so we think that the plan ought to go, the writers of the plan should go back and incorporate these concepts in their recommendations. And then finally, we had some recommendations about the actual land use map in the plan, which is map 16, and there's a table attached to this document that goes through those specific recommendations, most of which are corrections. And so completing our analysis, item K has to do with monitoring and evaluation. There's a section in the plan that actually has measures. There's 7 indicators that show that can be used as a benchmark for progress of this plan. What we recommend is that the plan actually show the methodology for each one of the 7 indicators, as well as the current data that's available for each indicator, so that we know that would be the starting point for future comparisons. So we think that should be published as part of the plan. So our overall recommendation, we think there are a lot of good things in this plan to support. There's a lot of merit to what's being recommended in the strategies, many of the strategies. But we do feel that with the comments that I previously made tonight, as well as specific items in the tables that follow, page 12 in the report, we feel that those changes are necessary to make the plan conform to the City Council's policies going forward. And I'd just like to highlight for a moment some of the items that are in. I'm not going to go through each one of the things in the tables, but there are 4 tables. One has to do with the strategy recommendations of the plan, where we have specific recommendations in response. The second table has to do with functional plan amendments and Plan 2035. These are things that actually amend the county general plan. When this master plan gets approved, it will amend certain aspects of that plan. So we have some recommendations for that. There's a list of high priority implementation measures, so that's the 3rd table. And then the 4th table, as I mentioned, is future land use map 16 recommendations. So looking very quickly at the first table on page 13, the master plan strategies, we felt that at least one I wanted to mention is land use 2.3, LU 2.3, which is the second one there. And that has to do with the mapping in the general plan as it relates to the Jesuit property on Maryland Route 450. And currently, the recommendation is to take the part of the Jesuit property on the south side of Maryland 450 and put it back into the rural area as opposed to the established communities. So it's changing the policy line from basically the developing area to the rural area. What we are recommending here is that they go further and include all of the Jesuit property, because they own property on both sides of 450, and we think the north side of 450, which at one time also had the rural designation, we think this should also be included in land use 2.3. So that's one that I wanted to point out. It is a long-standing council item. Another one on page 15, actually there's 3 recommendations for the Bowie Town Center area. Under transportation, it's TM 16.2, 16.3, and 16.4. These are all recommendations to create a new road system within the Bowie Town Center property itself. And we believe this is going a little bit too far in terms of master planning. The plan's sort of a high-level policy document. And there, at this point, there's no need to be planning for roads on private properties. There's no public road necessity here, and that this road system is something that if a private property owner wanted to follow through on would be acceptable, but that the plan shouldn't actually recommend that as a public road. And we have a similar concern about a recommendation in Old Town Bowie, which is at the top of page 16, which is transportation and mobility 22.1, where they're recommending a new public road being constructed between 11th Street and Railroad Avenue with a 20-foot right-of-way. We do not believe a public road, this would be right behind the Old Town Bowie Grill, I believe. We do not believe a public road is necessary, and that's not something that's been discussed here with the city. So we oppose that recommendation. Moving down the page to Transportation 29.3, this recommends a couple of new interchanges along US 301, and one that we have not seen before is one at the intersection of Mitchellville and Queen Anne Bridge Roads. But we think that that makes a lot of sense there. It's sort of an outlet point to the community, and in the future, as you know, Route 301 is going to be upgraded to a controlled access freeway, kind of like the Beltway, where you have to get on and off by going through ramp systems, and that Mitchellville Road and Queen Anne Bridge Road makes sense to us to have an interchange there. So that's a new thing the council has never seen before that we support. At the bottom of that page, HN 7.1, one of the recommendations was in Old Town Bowie to construct new infill housing on city-owned property. And we believe it's premature for the city to agree to something like that, that it shouldn't really be in the plan. It's a good thought. It's something to examine for the future, but we do not think it's appropriate, and we oppose that HN 7.1 recommendation. On the next page, page 17, similarly for Old Town Bowie, the plan is recommending an HD 9.3, exploring the potential of a business improvement district or a Main Street organization to manage Old Town Bowie community building activities. And again, this is something that really I think can happen on its own. It's not. It's more of an economic development initiative. It's not really something that the master plan needs to recommend. And so we feel like it's premature to get involved with this, and we recommend opposing that. The item right below that, however, is one discussing in Old Town Bowie pursuing the Maryland Arts and Entertainment District designation, and we believe this is something that should be supported. We feel that there's some merit there to looking at the land uses, the encouragement of artist housing and things like that over the future as a goal. So we think that that's a good recommendation of the plan. I also wanted to note, and it's not in this chart, but under Healthy Communities HC 1.4, there's a recommendation, if you looked at our table or if you looked at the plan, HC 1.4 has to do with the Bowie Food Pantry. And again, it's not in this table, but the Bowie Food Pantry recommendation reads that expand the operation of the City of Bowie's food pantry to distribute fresh produce more than 3 times per week during the peak season. And at first you look at that and you say, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with trying to accelerate or increase the output of our food pantry. But a couple of issues that arise with that is that the City of Bowie does not actually operate the food pantry. It's located on city property, but the city does not operate that. Also that the pantry does already satisfy their clientele with the days of operation that they have. So having additional days isn't going to increase the clientele. It's that they're fully satisfying their requirements by being open on certain days. And so there really is, and I was contacted by a member of the food pantry who felt that this recommendation was just a little bit too excessive, and they had not been consulted in this. So we would recommend that HC 1.4 be deleted from the plan. Just a couple other ones. The ice rink site on Church Road, that's PF 7.2. That's the next to last one on the bottom of the page, page 17. They're recommending that a public recreation facility be constructed on that property. And we believe it's premature for the for this to be recommended as a specific project because it really requires an internal decision by the city. And so we think it should be deleted from the plan. There is another recommendation in this table on the top of page 18, PF 15.1, which is a recommendation to develop a trail or at least evaluate the feasibility of developing a hiker-biker trail within what's called the Archer Tract Park. And that's a piece of property owned by Park and Planning on the north side of Maryland 450 between Free State Shopping Center and Hilltop. It's a wooded parcel. It's been that way for years, and there really is a need to try to connect those centers together and provide more of a recreational amenity in the immediate area. And our Trails Master Plan even recommended doing a connection like this. So we recommend supporting PF 15.1. The recommendations on the next table pertain to the general plan and amending the functional plan. LU 2.3, which is the number 2 there, is what I described earlier about the Jesuit property on both sides of Maryland 450. LU 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, these are 5.4. Those are all things that relate to our position statement about the Bowie Center and the core area. So we've modified or recommend modification of what's in their plan regarding those. And then if you turn to page 20, we do have 2 additional recommendations that were not in the plan that we believe should be functional plan amendments, general plan amendments. And number 13 there is a new recommendation regarding what property was called the Offen property. This is a piece of property on the east side of US 301, south of Mill Branch Road. It's where the pumping station is. There's a WSSC pumping station. As you're going northbound, after you pass the landscape nursery on the right, the pumping station and the driveway and the gate back to it is just on the right-hand side. And that property is actually in the developing area, the established communities. We think this is the opportunity now to move that line and just put it into the rural community, just like the rest of the property on the east side of 301. And similarly, our recommendation 14 there is at the southeast quadrant of US 301 and Mill Branch Road. There is a triangular piece of property that is currently in the established communities. We'd like to also, for the same reasons, move that property back into the rural area. I don't need to cover the high priority implementation measures. I think that speaks for itself. The point being that there was simply a listing of those in the plan. There were 16 items among other items that the county considered high priorities. Some of them are short-term, some of them are long-term, and one of them is mid-term. And so we've recommended either supporting or opposing, and in particular related to the Bowie State area. I know the City Council's position in the past has been to not take a position, to just allow the university to do what the university thinks is best for them. So if anything that relates to those, the Bowie State University area, the council we would recommend not taking a position. And then finally, the last table is future land use, and I mentioned that a lot of them are corrections to the map that we think were just errors in the coloring and designating certain properties. Just a couple of them that I wanted to mention bring to your attention. The number 1 there, the Old Town Bowie at 8th Street and Chestnut, they're recommending the area, I think it's north of the town green, to be neighborhood mixed use. And we think that that's actually extending the commercial area designation too far into the residential area. So we think that should be scaled back and designated residential low. And then likewise, a similar change on the east side of Old Town Bowie, where they've indicated rural agricultural in some of the undeveloped sections as you get, it would be north of Maryland 564, kind of over where the Pepco power line is. They're recommending rural agriculture for that area. But the platted section of Old Town Bowie, we believe, should be set up for development and should be part of the residential planned area. So we recommend residential low for that. And then skipping down to item 6, Sussex Lane, city land. This area is identified in the plan and has been identified in the county general plan for mixed use. And the Sussex Lane parcel, this is a piece of property that the city owns across from Bowie High School and the Swim and Racket Club. We believe this should not be designated as neighborhood mixed use, which is the same designation as the shopping centers. We think this should be residential low to be similar to the surrounding residential areas. And I think that's about all I wanted to cover. Those are some of the major highlights in the plan. Our intention would be to give council a recommendation from the BAPB, and what we did was in our review document, we left a column for the BAPB recommendation in the right-hand side, and so it would be my intention to give the council a revised version of this, that if the board agrees with our recommendations, we'll just simply put a check in there so that they can see that you've looked at it. And if there are any other recommendations you might want to add, anything that I haven't covered or any questions that you might have, I can answer those questions at this time. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and I know we have a couple of residents here, not sure if they've signed up to speak, but tonight is a public hearing, so you may want to call for the hearing after we're done with questions.
Thanks, Joe. Very, very good, very thorough.
Thank you.
Question that I have is the strategy recommendations and the staff recommendations. The strategy recommendations came from where again?
They are in the plan. These are,
The ones that are in the
this is park and
park and planning, okay.
Right. The plan is set up to have goals and objectives and then strategies. So the strategies are the most detailed recommendations of the plan. In other words, the goal is pretty broad, but the strategies speak to individual properties or individual actions. And so what I did was, when I created this document, I pulled all 340 strategies out of the plan. So, and I think in our memo, we also talked about some of the policies and goals, if they needed to be modified
Right.
as well. But most of this targeted information is about the 340 strategies, which
Right.
are essentially the recommendations of the plan.
Right. So Joe, question, as the county is undergoing the comprehensive map amendment, how does this fit in and play with that, or does it?
Well, this is a subsequent step, and for the purposes of Park and Planning getting this plan done, they just assumed that that countywide map amendment was in place. So with any of the changes or any of the recommendations they're making, it all assumes that that zoning is already there. So there's very little additional changes, like the Zug Road area was one that I mentioned first, where the county plan is just going to keep it industrial. And this plan goes one step further to say, well, we think it ought to be, or the plan thinks it ought to be CGO so that it can offer all kinds of retail, office, residential opportunities. So that's one example. There are very few examples in this case.
So starting tonight and tomorrow night, the county is hearing, I guess the public hearing is tonight and tomorrow night on the comprehensive map amendment. So is someone from the city talking about these recommendations so that they're entered into the record at
Well,
the county?
it's two different processes, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the countywide map amendment is really putting into effect the zoning ordinance rewrite. It's been on hold. It'll become effective at the same time the map is implemented, so that the zones in the rewrite will then be put on the map. The city doesn't have any position regarding that, because the philosophy going into that was that they were going to transition the zones from the current zones to the most likely comparable zone. And so, you know, other than a zone like the CGO zone, which doesn't allow residential now, if it's CSC, if it's commercial shopping center, you can't do residential. That's a change that the new ordinance is just going to make across the board. Most areas are just changing one for one, from one residential zone to another residential zone that's comparable. So the council here looked at this. They've had a couple of presentations over the past year and decided that really there was no significant impact as a result of that map amendment if it was just going to be a one-for-one change. So essentially that's a given going into this master plan update. and that October 4th hearing will be at the county on these recommendations.
Gotcha.
And we're
Okay.
hoping that the city council will send a letter down there that hopefully includes a lot of the things in this memo.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Well, good?
So you need a recommendation from us?
Yes.
We want to hear from the,
Some kind of a motion, yeah, if there's any.
yeah, after we have the public
Yeah.
hearing. Right, so, are you gentlemen signed up to speak? Would you like to speak?
I didn't sign up to speak, but I have something to say.
Well, then, please come to the mic, state your name and your address for the record, please.
Okay. John Teasdale. I'm at 12757 Midwood Lane.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Bowie?
Teasdale. Go
And
right ahead.
I have a general comment and a specific comment. The general comment basically is supportive of staff position on defining the center area and the core area, that it needs to be expanded beyond the margins that the master plan itself has. I think that the county 2035 plan basically says that that development should be in activity centers and not just suburban sprawl across the county. So that's the basic model, and I think that the Bowie Town Center area is a good, well, that has been identified in the county 2035 plan as one of those core activity centers, and I think that staff's recommendation is a good one for expanding the core beyond what this particular master plan has defined it as. So I agree with that. The master plan also would like to see multifamily housing put in neighborhood shopping centers, and that I definitely do not agree with. Bowie Plaza, Free State Mall, Marketplace, Pointer Ridge Shopping Center, the master plan all lists multifamily housing going into those areas as well. And I definitely think in the neighborhoods, the single-family neighborhoods, that we should not be putting multifamily housing into those shopping centers. But I'm all for developing the core town center as a area where there'd be more urban development with multifamily housing and increased transportation focus in that. So the specific comment I have to do is also to echo, and now I'm switching hats now. I'm a volunteer at the Bowie Food Pantry, and there is that one item in there in the food section of the master plan that advocates for the Bowie Food Pantry being open more than 3 days a week. And first, as Mr. Minor had said, the Bowie Food Pantry is independent of the city. It's not a city operation, as the master plan implies. And second, clients are provided access if they're from the Bowie of City twice a month, and if they're from the county once a month. And when they do come to the pantry, we have a garden that provides fresh produce. We get donations from local gardeners. We buy produce. So each client gets a big bag of fresh produce. So I think the idea that by being open more days a week than the current 3 days a week, that people would have access to healthier food is not accurate. That the pantry, the present operation, does provide for all of the clients that want to come to the food pantry, and they do get a good batch of healthy, fresh produce, as well as the other dry goods and that the pantry provides. So
you're in support of the city's recommendation?
Yes.
On the food pantry?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I support the city's recommendation on that as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're just here to say, just to hang out? Okay, good. All right, well, I will declare at this point the public hearing to have been held and is now closed on the Bowie master plan for Bowie, Mitchellville, and vicinity. And at this point, I guess we need to go to the checklist or the table that Joe's provided for us. And are there any questions on that, or is there any discussion that you want to have on any of the items that we should be accepting staff or modifying staff recommendation on? Mr. Scopes, you good? Mr. Schuler? Mr. Byrd? Chair is good. So I think that the unanimous decision of the board is going to be to accept staff's recommendation on all of the recommendations for future land use. Is that what we're voting on, right?
You need a motion, yeah?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. So we have 1, 2, so for all of the tables, do we want to take separate motions, or will one motion suffice for all of the recommendations?
Mr. Chair, I would say if we look at the recommendation on page 12,
Page 12? Okay, got it.
it says because staff finds many of the recommendations contained in, you can say because the BAPB finds, and basically mirror what those two paragraphs say and make that your motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to accept and support because the Bowie staff finds many of the recommendations contained in the preliminary master plan are consistent with the city council policies. Staff recommends, or excuse me, I recommend supporting the proposed update to the 2006 Bowie and vicinity area master plan, along with the input and recommendations noted by city staff.
Okay. No second.
So moved.
All right, so we have a motion for acceptance of staff's recommendations by Mr. Schutler and a second by Mr. Byrd. Are we ready for are there any questions or discussion?
No questions, Mr. Chair, but I do want to applaud and commend Mr. Meinhardt and his staff for just an absolutely wonderful job as usual.
Very detailed.
All right, so having said that, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
All right?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Staff, the chair votes aye as well. Motion carries. All right, thank you, Mr. Meinert.
Mr. Chair, I
And
move-
with that, we have minutes.
Yep, that's what I'm about to.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I approve to accept the approval of minutes from June 8th, 2021 as written.
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes of June 8th. Let's see, was everybody here eligible to vote on approving those minutes?
I think we all can vote.
Yeah, Paul, myself,
Yeah, we can all vote on it.
Okay,
Ron was here too.
all right, so, second, is there a second? Okay, Mr. Byrd, second that. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Minutes of June 8th are approved. Do you have any other minutes to approve? That's it? Yeah, I want to say too, I think that it is great that we all are able to come together. It's been over a year and a half since we've been able to have these meetings face to face. I want to thank you, the members of the community, for coming out and spending some time with us this evening. Staff, Joe, I know that you're a little shorthanded now that Frank is gone. The amount of work that hasn't been reduced because you lost one of your staff. So the work goes on, and you are doing an outstanding job of keeping pace with all of the things that need to be done, and I want to thank you for that.
Here, here.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Okay, so one more motion?
Mr. Chair, move to adjourn?
Second, Mike Bird.
Is there a need for a vote? No. Thank you all. Joe, what's next on our agenda?
We